with MongoDB. I believe it has already been started, right? Using sudo, right? Sudo mongodb. You should already be at this point, right, where you can start a local instance of the database. When you install Mongo, right, there's a couple of executables that get installed in your bin directory. And we're interested in at least two of these executables. One is mongodb to be able to start the database, and the other one is a command line interpreter that allows you to interact with the database. Right? Notice that when I started Mongo, notice that it says that it's listening at a particular port, listening at 27,017 in the local machine, and this one my command line interpreter connects to that port, right? And so we can start interacting with it, you can query it, right? Like ask it to show you what databases are already there, right? This is quite a few of databases that I've been working on throughout several semesters, right now, according to our application, we already were using a database instance that was being created by the app.js here under the test directory, right? And I believe it's right here in app.js. Notice that it's connecting to, it's using a mongoose to connect to this database at this location. This is the local IP address, local host, right? And this is the port of the local instance running on my machine. Right, and this is the name of the database that we're trying to connect to, right? And it's using Mongoose. So Mongoose is a library that allows you to connect to MongoDB, right? It abstracts the database a little bit, right? To add a lot of the features that the database itself does not provide. For instance, things like schemas, right? When in relational databases, it's a very common thing to define schemas. Whenever you're defining a new table to be able to store records in there, typically you say, well, what are the fields, right? This is going to be a first name, a last name, date of birth, things like that, right? And you give them names, and then you have to adhere to those names, right? Whenever you insert or delete or remove things or update records in the database, you have to provide those field names, right? They have to match exactly what the schema you provided. And also the data that is being stored in those records also have to follow a specification, right? So part of the schema, you say what the names are of the fields and also what their data types are, right? This is going to be a string, that's going to be a number, a date, and whatnot, right? And whenever you insert or update things in the database, whatever the operations are, the database is responsible for validating that the names of the fields are correct, that the data types are correct, yes? Otherwise, it'll give you some kind of error. Well, MongoDB does not support any of that, right? So, to be able to, and we'll see that some relational database folks, that have been working with the relational database for quite some time will cringe at this, right? That there's no schemas or things like that. That there's no validation, and says, well, it's chaos, right? It's pandemonium. So Mongoose and many other libraries out there, right, bring back some of that sanity of validating the data that goes back and forth into the database. So we're going to be doing a lot of the things that we would be normally delegating to a database. We're going to be doing it at the application level, right? At the application level, we're going to be doing some of that validation. And Mongoose allows us to automate a lot of that, right, so that we don't have to do it ourselves. It does validation, it manages schemas for us, but it's done at the application level as opposed to at the database level. Make sense? All right. So let's play around a little bit with MongoDB. If we go into the test database in there, right? We can say use the test database. We can show what the tables are in here, right? What are the collections of tables that we have been using? So a little bit of jargon here. So instead of tables, from relational databases, here in non-SQL in MongoDB, we refer to them as collections, right? So in relational databases, we say tables. Here we say collections, right? So it's here, instead of asking to show me what the tables are, we say show me what are the collections. So show me collections, right? So right now we have movies, students, to-dos, right? So these are all collections in here. So let's we can also see what the records are have been stored in these collections, but we don't call them records in MongoDB. We call them documents, right? The connotation is that these are instances of objects that are stored here, not records, right? As in fields and that have a particular schema, right? So for instance, for movies, you can ask it to show you all the movies, right? All commands start with the keyword db dot. Oh, can you even see that? I guess let's see. Can you see that? A little bit. There we go. We can say db dot and then the collection that we want to interact with. So for instance, we might say db.movie, right? And then the command that you want to invoke. So for instance, you might say find. So find is a function that can be applied to a collection to be able to retrieve the records or documents, right, following a particular criteria. And you provide the criteria here in the functions, right? You can provide a criteria. Criteria are like in the select statement, right? You can say select employees whose salary is so and so, who were employed between these range of dates, right? That work for particular departments. So that's a criteria by which you want to filter out certain records, right? And we can provide that in here in the function. If we don't provide any criteria, it's interpreted as give me all the documents, right? With no filtering. I want all of them, right? And we're back to James Cameron movies, Aliens, Terminators, Alien Covenant coming later this spring, and Avatar. Notice that these documents, we don't call these records, we call them documents. They're represented as JSON objects, right, that have certain attributes. Here we have an attribute of title that has a name, right, a property or attribute, and then value. So name-value pairs, right? There's several name-value pairs. Plus another one here it's an underscore ID, which should be a little familiar from what we've been using so far when we were creating websites and pages and whatnot. We've been using this underscore ID, yes? And the reason we did that is to be forward compatible when we did the switch into MongoDB, right? We've been using the underscore ID. So hopefully the code that you've been writing so far, right, should be compatible with these pseudo schema here of how objects are created. These are primary keys that are generated automatically by the database to uniquely identify each record, right, or each document. Okay? You can override that if you don't like the naming that of this random unique ID. You can provide your own unique identifier, right? But it's safer to just let the database choose its primary key, almost like relational database. You would say auto increment a particular index, right? So this one is auto creating your indices. Make sense? All right. So if I want to insert new movies in here, you can grab the same collection movie and say that I want to insert and provide a JSON object, right? A JSON object that has attributes in here. So I might say title, and I might say the abyss. Okay, notice that it gives me some status information saying that yes, one new record was inserted. I can do a find again, and it shows me that new record that I just created. Yes, right. If I mistype it, and instead of title, I don't remember the schema of the collection, and I think it's name, and I type here Titanic, and say enter. Notice that it doesn't complain, right? It doesn't validate that the schema is because there is no schema, right? If I look for the records, It gives me records. Some records have titles. Some records have names, right? Some records might have integers or floats or strings. It doesn't really care, right? It's just instances of objects that you just inserted into a common collection. Yeah, it's pandemonium, right? It's chaos. Yes.
How do you create the database?
When you at the top you can say use and my new database. That's it, right? It doesn't actually create it until you start when you start using it and start inserting in it, and then it creates it, right? But it knows about it. So if you say show DBs, it doesn't actually show it in there, does it? Until you start actually creating a collection in it, right? It'll create it. Right? Also, if you provide the name of the database right here, if it doesn't exist, it'll auto create it. That's very typical in other databases as well, other vendors, right? The configuration is that if it doesn't exist, it'll create it, auto create it. A lot of ORMs tools also do this, right? If it doesn't exist, it will auto create it. All right, so let's see. So we can definitely find. We can create using insert. Oh, where's my? Oh, let's go back to test and find. There we are. Or you can ask for a particular movie, providing a particular criteria, and so you can say find, but though that movie whose title is Avatar. Right, and notice that it returns that one movie. All right. If you have lots and lots of attributes, and it was just very hard to read, you can pipe it to other functions such as pretty, which will pretty print it so that you can read each attribute per line. Right. So if you have many different attributes, that's much easier to read. Okay. You can also remove things. So for instance, you can remove avatar here. You can say db.movie. Is it remove? Yeah, remove. And then you can provide a filter, right? The criteria by which you want to remove, right? I want to remove the movie whose title is Avatar, right? And notice that it comes back with a status saying yes, one record was removed. If I do a find, notice that it's no longer there. Okay, or I can change the title of one of the records by using update and providing two arguments. The first argument will be my selector, right? Of which record are you modifying, right? So for instance, if I want to modify this one, I can say I want to modify the one whose title, right, is Aliens 3, which is it's my least favorite Aliens, and I'll change it to my favorite Aliens, just Aliens, number 2. That's where the series should have ended, and there was no need for the other two. So we can change it, right? And so it looks for that particular record and modifies it, and it says that it did not work. What? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed something. So the second attribute here, the second argument is a command of, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to change? Okay. And so there are several commands available that allow you to manipulate that record. One of them is set. Set allows you, like the name suggests, allows you to modify or change the value of an existing attribute, right? So I can say set the value of the attribute title to be aliens, right? And change it there, and then it comes back with with some status saying that yes, it matched one record and I updated that one record. Okay. If I do a find, notice that it has been changed. Yes, make sense? All right. There's quite a few of these operations. We're doing it manually, but what's really interesting is being able to do this programmatically, right? From following certain rules and algorithms as a result of interacting with some user interface, right? So let's play around with that a little bit, okay? All right.